Coming up next on Tech News Today, Apple had a whole bunch of announcements today at the WWDC keynote, and we're going to talk all about those, including the end of OS X and the beginning of iOS 10. Also, Microsoft will acquire LinkedIn, and it makes a whole lot of sense. We'll get into all the reasons why. Amazon's Mechanical Turk has been super useful for scientific research, but now people are wondering if it's safe to rely on the service. And finally, you too can command your own Starship Enterprise in virtual reality. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1533, recorded Monday, June 13th, 2016.
This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Zerto, virtual replication and disaster recovery technology that gives you the confidence to keep your business moving forward no matter what comes your way. Zerto empowers you to protect and recover your IT assets, move to the cloud, and know you're ready for anything. Get a free readiness assessment for your data center at confidencecio.com.
And by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100 plus job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen rate and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT.
And by Wealthfront. Wealthfront is a low-cost automated investment service and the most sophisticated way to invest your money. Whether you've got millions or you're just starting out, visit wealthfront.com/TNT and sign up to get your free personalized investment portfolio. That's wealthfront.com/TNT. This is Tech News Today, the show where we talk about all the tech news, Apple, Microsoft, LinkedIn, whatever comes up, we will talk about it with people who are passionate about technology. I am Megan Morrone.
And I'm Jason Howell. How's it going, Megan?
It's going well. The band's back together.
Band's back together. Whew, thankfully. Man, last week when we were doing the intro of the show, only live viewers would know this. I had to do the intro like 4 different times because I kept messing it up. It's just not the same without you.
Yeah, it's not the same without you either.
Well, it's good to have you back, especially today because lots of Apple stuff to talk about. Joining us to talk all about all of the Apple news and beyond is Dr. Kiki Sanford. How's it going, Dr. Kiki?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on.
Are you kidding? I love getting you on. It's been such a long time. I'm trying to think of the last time we podcasted, and I don't even know. That's how long it's been.
It's been a really long time. Yeah.
And it's been so long forever. It's been forever since I know we crossed paths vaguely in the cottage days, but never at the same time. So it's awesome to meet you.
It's wonderful to meet you, too, to get to do a show together.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about This Week in Science, which is kind of your jam.
Yeah. This Week in Science has been my jam for a long time. And we basically covered this week's news in science. And I have 2 co-hosts, Justin, who's a car salesman and our opinionologist, and Blair, who is our zoologist. She actually works at a zoo, so she knows what she's talking about when it comes to animals. And then I cover, the rest of the stuff, brains and space and, whatever seems interesting. But I've been covering science news for a really long time. I love it.
That's awesome. TWIS.org is where you can find kind of information on This Week in Science.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. All right, let's do this.
Let's get started. Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference began today in San Francisco. Leo and I covered the keynote this morning. Here is everything you need to know in a nutshell. Tim Cook took to the stage at the beginning, and he started by asking everyone to stand and take a minute of silence to remember the victims in Sunday's attack in Orlando. It was subtle, it was powerful, lacked any political stance. Then he quickly moved on to the tech content of the day, as we will too. So no hardware was announced today. Instead, the company focused on software that would hopefully keep making people buy more hardware in the future, and software that would be more open to developers, creating new software for iOS, tvOS, watchOS, and the Mac OS, which is the new name for OS X. The newest version is Mac OS Sierra. Jason, what are your overall thoughts?
Every time I hear Mac OS Sierra, I think of Sierra Online, and I think of all the wonderful games I played back in my youth. And I really want, I could envision the boot up screen for Mac OS Sierra, and it would be infused with lots of retro gaming goodness. But in reality, beyond that, it sounds like they're kind of pushing ahead. It's 15 years, right? OS X or OS 10, whatever you want to call it. 15 years, I think it was kind of time to maybe move forward from that branding, because the X, the 10, really kind of stopped meaning very much at this point 15 years later. But some good stuff.
Dr. Kiki, what do you think about anything that you read today about that was announced?
Oh, I just think it's great that they are moving forward with it. I mean, being able to bring all of these different platforms together, under the Mac OS Sierra umbrella, I think it's gonna be good. I think they're moving forward in the right way.
So Mac OS will include Siri on the desktop. That was one of the big things, which is interesting. We've been talking a lot about that, like whether we feel comfortable or whether we need to be talking to our laptops and our desktops. What about you? Do you think that's something you're going to start doing?
Me using the Siri? Maybe. I don't know. I think my son might use it a lot more often than I do. He's a lot, 5 years old. He's a lot more into jumping into the verbal Siri. Get this for me. So
it's true. I know exactly what you mean, actually, because my 6-year-old, same deal, right? She is not shy at all, and I think at talking to the device. Primarily because that's, at least at that age, that's their window into the internet. Because it's not like, my 6-year-old is a fluent typist necessarily, but that allows her to explore the internet for good and for bad.
Right. Well, so maybe this means we're just going to have more controls on the computer, right?
Yeah. That's what they need to build into OS Sierra.
Well, Siri at least will tell, like when you say curse words or something, it does a little bit of the parenting for us sometimes, I've noticed. I did see a piece over the weekend that said something about voice devices are turning all of our children into jerks.
I don't think that's true at all.
That's so not true.
But, yeah, I saw that article too, and I thought to myself, that is complete BS. But, everyone's allowed to have an opinion.
If I could go into the Google archives, because Google holds on to all of those little voice queries that you do, and you can actually access them through the dashboard. And if I could go in there and actually access all of the commands that my daughter has given to Google, almost all of them end with please. It's just what she does. So I take full, yes, I do not believe
Good
that
job,
at all.
Jason.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, hey, we did something right.
Right.
The robots, when they rise up, are going to spare her because she was super nice about it. Continuity and auto unlock with the Apple Watch. I think that's pretty cool. We've seen a little bit of this. Like, it was interesting from my perspective, because as I've said plenty of times before on the show, I'm not really an iOS user, and it's always interesting to see these announcements, and I'm sure it is for you when Google has their big announcements, to kind of see what things you feel like already familiar with. And something like this is just a no-brainer. They've kind of worked on this a little bit on the Google side, and I think that makes things just a lot more convenient from a security standpoint, being able to kind of still have that security, but if you're wearing a trusted device, have it kind of unlock things for you.
I'm super excited to open my Mac with my watch. But yeah, I mean, it's different for me when I hear Google announce things, because I use so many Google products.
Yeah, I suppose so.
And, it's so enmeshed in our lives. And it really just speaks to how closed Apple is as a system, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and how open Google is. And that's really different. So, yeah. One of the most, did you want to say something else about Mac?
No, I just, developer access begins today. So developers actually have access to this right away with a public beta in July and release fall 2016. And yeah.
Another aspect that I found really interesting today was a new app called Home that's going to help people manage their Internet of Things devices on iOS. Apple said Apple TV users will be able to control their Internet of Things devices remotely with their Apple TV. So now the Apple TV becomes the HomeKit hub, that hub that we've been looking for. I've used so many Internet of Things hubs and been really unhappy with all of them. Kiki, is this something that you use? Is your home automated at all?
We have a little bit of stuff. Like, we've got the Nest and we've got a couple of other things, but it still is just like the apps on the phone to be able to control all of that. And they're all kind of disparate. And it would be really nice to see it all put together in one nice little hub that could be accessed really easily, and just so that the user interface and the user experience is a much smoother thing. I mean, who doesn't want to come home and say, Siri, turn up the heat, or whatever it happens to be, you want that.
Siri, I'm home, and have like 5 synchronized things kind of fire off in sequence.
Yeah. Have the lights go to your presets, or your, the stereo come on, or whatever it happens to be.
Apple definitely takes the slow and steady approach with these things. And I think that's what we're seeing here. HomeKit was announced with iOS 8. It was a couple of versions ago. HomeKit products really didn't start appearing until shortly before iOS 9. And when iOS 9 finally kind of hit people's hands, there still were, a small kind of amount of them. So here we are almost 2 years later, and we're kind of finally starting to see this integration, both with, Apple TV is kind of the hub, and that's super, helpful because, anyone that has an Apple TV, or, that's more reason to buy it. And they're like really not that expensive these days. And then, the home app, as far as like a kind of a unifying place where if you don't want to have to talk to your home automation, because some people just don't enjoy talking to Siri and making commands that way, at least now there's like an Apple version of the app that you can control this on iOS devices.
Really? I mean,
and it looks nice.
It has to be easier than turning on and off the lights yourself. I mean, that's the most ridiculous
right,
thing.
Yeah,
Here,
exactly.
Open this app and press this button. Go get your phone if you don't have it already. And it's like, I'm pretty sure turning off and on a light switch was easier than that.
I feel that way so often with these, we're taking this thing that you're used to doing and we're bringing it into the computer, or we're bringing it into the smartphone to make your life easier. And it's like, well, actually, it didn't actually make my life easier, especially if it didn't work the first time. So
Apple also announced iOS 10, which they're calling the biggest iOS app ever. A beta is available now for developers, with a public beta this summer and a release in the fall. So iOS 10, and they went through 10 big features, a bunch of stuff. If you want to know all that, you can watch either iOS Today that we talked about, or also if you wanted to watch the live stream and go into detail. Was there anything that caught your eye, Jason?
Well, the new and improved lock screen, which I thought, kind of talking about what I was talking about earlier about these features that you're like, oh yeah, we've had that, whatever, this, that. Widgets added to the lock screen, which when you look at least in the world of Android, widgets were there for a long time, and now they're not there anymore. They cast it to the side, and they ended up replacing it with kind of an enhanced notification display. So do you is that something, I don't know, did you like what you saw as far as kind of the widgets on the lock screen?
I did like what I saw, because basically what they were saying was, here's how to interact with your notifications as quickly as possible. You don't have to open your phone anymore. You can text right from your notification screen. And I think with this, and I think this is what the watch is trying to do. This is what a lot of like voice devices are trying to do. Keep us from just having the phone in the face all the time. I think a lot of us are just realizing this is not how we want to live. We want to get done what we wanted to do on our phone and put it away, or our watch, or just speak to something and just not have the screens in our faces. So that's what I thought about those changes. Really, we're making it easier to interact with our phone as quickly as possible.
Kiki, from the features that are kind of coming out with iOS 10, well, I imagine you are an iOS user, right? You're an iPhone user?
I'm not. I'm an Android user, so yeah.
Okay, so how
she's with you. Hashtag I'm with you, Jason.
I know, we outnumber you, Megan. I don't know. So, okay, well then along those lines, did you ever, like the common kind of discussion around, let's say, lock screen and enhanced functionality around the lock screen is that the more stuff you put there, the less secure the device is. Did you ever use kind of widgets on your lock screen? Did you find that helpful, or was that kind of a security world that you didn't want to enter into?
No, I really like just not. Yeah, I didn't want to get past that security issue. I mean, I really like having to log into my phone, because it also gives me that psychological moment of I am logging into my phone to do something now. Whereas if it's too easy for me, maybe I'll just be doing stuff on my phone all the time that I don't need to be. So for me, I'm going to stay out of that. No widgets on my lock screen.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Stay behind it. Yeah.
Another thing, QuickType, which is basically Siri IQ inside the keyboard. So you're seeing a little bit more of that, that push into AI, and with Siri kind of expanding out of just being a voice assistant, but also kind of coming into other elements of the device, changing language based on the context of the conversation. I thought that was actually a really cool feature. I like that a lot. Not that I speak many languages, but I can imagine that would be really, really helpful,
Right.
really useful.
Changing keyboards if it was in Chinese or
Right.
It's funny that you mentioned AI because they did not ever say the words AI or artificial intelligence. It was deep learning. That was deep learning is the soft and fuzzy way of getting around AI. Kiki, you must have always be thinking about artificial intelligence. I mean, this is couldn't. There's no way to overestimate the importance of this in the future. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I mean, we're going to become more and more reliant on this deep learning, artificial intelligence. It's just a question of how much autonomy do we put into those algorithms? How much reliance do we really put into that artificial intelligence before, suddenly we're not just telling our phone what to do, but our phone's telling us what to do. And, we might get there one day, but we're not there yet.
Developers can tap into Siri also, by the way, with a SDK to kind of add features into it. Pretty cool. Yeah,
that was my big hope for Siri because unless developers and other apps can be part of Siri, she's never going to be smart enough. She's never going to be smart enough to work as well as my Amazon Echo does, and I'm excited about that because, we'll be able to say send a Slack message to Jason, because right now it's I can send messages, but I have to use iMessage and I can't, so yeah.
Now you have mentioned in the past that you're not a big fan of the music experience, the music app. Do you like the changes that they're putting into the new one?
They didn't talk much about it. It looks a little bit different, and I think they have divided. You can tell now what's your downloaded music versus what you're streaming. I'll have to see it, actually. I mean, it was an interesting presentation. They're going to add lyrics, and that's not something that I really want. I mean, they talked about curated playlists, which also, and this weird thing is I am old fashioned. I love Pandora, and Pandora does it for me, and I'm afraid Pandora won't be around anymore soon, but it's been the better suggester of music than any other app I've ever used.
Interesting.
iMessage is also getting an overhaul. There'll be disappearing messages, bigger emoji, predictive emoji, animated photos, handwritten messages, and even stickers. But I'm sorry, no app for Android users. Now, this is a rumor. I know, this is a rumor on Friday that you reported, Jason. I was hoping Apple would offer an iMessage app for Android. They didn't. I mean, I thought naively, well, they'll do that because as an iPhone user, it's annoying when someone can't use iMessage. I want them to be able to. So I thought that would be incentive enough, but Leo talked me down when we were talking about it earlier. He was like, no, they want people to stay on. And if iMessage is so great, they want people to switch over from Android.
Yeah, Kiki, was this this rumor that was bubbling up last week, and I kind of fell for it too. And I think part of that was just out of my desire to try it, right? And because I hear regularly that iOS users enjoy their message experience, and I feel like Google's just kind of dropped the ball repeatedly on their own platform. Do you think the kind of integration with the services inside of iMessages, which is another part of what they announced, more of kind of bringing these apps and the app experience inside of it, do you think that possibly kind of pushes the future of an Android version of iMessage further away?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I think it really does. I mean, people really want to have that kind of functionality, and they want to have the options. And I do understand, like you mentioned, they want to draw people into the Apple experience. They want people to get rid of their Android device. They want them to switch from Google. Myself personally for messaging, very often I go to Facebook because I've got the Messenger app. And so, that's just that's a whole other social walled garden that's developing stuff on its own. But it's just all these all these independent walled gardens. They're pushing each other further and further away and making people choose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought that would be another incentive for Apple to come up with a more cross-platform messaging to put iMessage on Android, because that a lot of people are turning to Facebook. You know, like everybody. Okay, a lot of my friends have Android phones, but they. They all have Facebook. Everybody does. So, except my husband, but not everybody. Everyone but him. But most people. So Apple also pushed privacy today. They touted their end-to-end encryption by default, reminded everyone that their products allow us to keep personal data in our control. They also mentioned something called differential privacy deployed at scale, which basically they were meaning this thing we're always talking about, that we want smarter features in Siri and iMessage and Photos, but we don't want to sacrifice our privacy. So there's this idea of differential privacy that will let us keep information on the device. Do you guys believe that this is possible?
I hope so.
I guess my question is, do you believe that that iMessage, whatever the predictive text that you were talking about, would that ever be as smart as what you can do with Google? Will the photos that they showed off, would that ever be as smart as what Google has without sacrificing our privacy?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that Google has is the giant data set, right? So they've been able to take everything into the cloud, build their algorithms based off of that massive data set, and then they can create algorithms that might not need the data set anymore. Once they've got it, they don't need that connectivity. You don't need to necessarily give up your privacy once the algorithm's been created. So Apple already has been collecting data. They've been building their own systems, and of course they're going to be able to, or at least purchasing other companies that are developing this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, they're absolutely, at some point, if people want privacy, that's what they're going to have to offer. They're going to have to say, okay, we developed this system and now we're going to put it on your phone so that your phone can do it without needing to connect, that it'll be able to predict just based on the algorithm that we have for you.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate where Apple, like the position that Apple has in kind of the security discussion at this point, right? And obviously San Bernardino was a huge turning point for that. And I almost feel like that told Apple what they really needed to buckle down on. And as a result, they've really become kind of a tech leader, maybe not necessarily in everyone's eyes like the shining example of tech security, but definitely creating a conversation around it and helping people who before San Bernardino and maybe during San Bernardino who were like, why are they so vehemently, opposed to opening up the security because there's this possible information there. I think now we're at a point where the conversation for a lot of people before that, they didn't care or they didn't know. And now it's part of the conversation. Apple keeps going with it. And I think that's a great position for them to be in. It gives them a position of strength to be able to come out like in an event like this and say, all of our products are encrypted, end to end. This is a focus that we have now. All of the IoT, Internet of Things. Regularly we hear people say, well, man, this is just the next world to be explored for tapping into information that you don't want shared because it's everywhere. And Apple's saying, no, we're putting this encryption all across the map. And I think that's a good position for them.
Yeah. And I mean, and they're pushing it forward where maybe other companies aren't doing the same thing. So eventually maybe this will bring more people into the Apple family because they're the ones saying that privacy and security are important. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They also announced watchOS 3. That's a new update to the Apple Watch that will come out in the fall. You can now keep your favorite apps in memory to prevent that spinning flower of death that any Apple Watch user knows. There will be emergency alert app, so like an SOS app if you need to either call 911 or whatever emergency number where you are, or just your emergency contacts. An app to remind you to breathe, easier ways to respond to messages, and a new Minnie Mouse watch face.
Not Minnie Mouth.
Not Minnie Mouse.
Not a very small mouth.
Watch face. Minnie Mouse. Because we had Mickey, and now we have Minnie as well.
Wait a minute. So learn to breathe? Reminder to breathe?
So it was basically saying, we talk about our health, and we have the activity app, and it measures your steps, and it measures your heart rate, and it measures how often you stand. And they pointed out, there are other things that are important to your health. One is just remembering to breathe. And there are tons of apps. I mean, I'm sure you've downloaded these apps.
Like mindfulness type things.
Or like I've set
take a break.
Yeah, right. Like just look at this circle, or I've downloaded and set reminders for myself. Just okay, everything's okay, kind of. So there was going to be they made that part of the app.
It's this year's stand up at the top of the hour thing.
Breathe.
Yeah. Well, high stress people in high stress jobs maybe don't breathe as often as they need to.
Probably so.
They stand there, all clenched up. Take that breath.
Yeah.
So
maybe you need something to beep at you for it.
As a scientist, like Kiki, what have you thought about this Apple Watch being part of what people talk about a lot in the past year? Is it something that you think is more helpful, or just kind of a waste of time?
No, I don't think it's a waste of time at all. I mean, for people who do want to be health conscious, it's nice to have those reminders. It's nice to have this wearable that you like to wear that also has more functions maybe than some other wearables that are just single function tools. And so I think it's great that Apple Watch is getting in on that, and that the apps that they're able to provide will maybe help keep people breathing more, standing more, being more mindful. I mean, there's going overboard on things, but just having reminders to do stuff is not bad.
I like the SOS feature, by the way. And you talked about it a little bit, but basically you set up kind of contacts that will be alerted if you hold down that button on the side, and it'll send an emergency notification to the contacts, medical info that might be tied to that. I just think that's a really great use of something that you're always wearing. Hopefully, you're still always wearing, anyways.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not still wearing mine, my wearable, but
yeah, and I think it's an incentive for people to buy it for their parents, that sort of thing, or maybe their kids. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Kids. Yeah. Definitely the kids.
Yeah, right.
They did show, find my friends on there, how easy that is, find my friends, aka track your children. So anyone who doesn't have a teenager yet will not understand that, but you will.
Remind me.
Up next, Microsoft made a big purchase today. It was not Twitter. But first, let's take a minute to thank Zerto, the sponsor of this episode. Zerto is an IT asset protection, disaster recovery, and cloud continuity for confident CIOs. Confidence can make or break business in today's IT world. It can mean the difference between hesitation and action, success or irrelevance. Zerto's cloud-based business continuity solutions arm today's CIOs and IT pros with the confidence to know their systems are ready for anything. With Zerto, you can recover from downtime, test new technology, and move to the cloud in a matter of clicks, all while maintaining business continuity. Zerto's virtual replication technology gives you the power to simplify your migrations, switch to new infrastructure faster, and get quicker ROI in a matter of clicks. Know your data is protected by breakthrough hypervisor-based software that puts the power of continuous replication at your fingertips. Migrate to the cloud with no disruptions with enterprise-class software that empowers you to seamlessly and safely move virtualized workloads between public, private, and hybrid clouds. Recover from any disruption with checkpoints every few seconds. Protect and recover files, VMs, and applications from any point in time. See for yourself how Zerto simplifies your data replication and disaster recovery, and get a free readiness assessment for your data center at confidentcio.com. That's confidentcio.com, and we thank Zerto for their support.
All right, we have some non-Apple stories today.
We do?
Two out of three are Microsoft, though. So, hey, this is just the news. I mean, this is a big day. All major tech companies knew today was going to be an Apple day. So here you go. But Microsoft wasn't ready to let Apple steal all the thunder. So it got things started by announcing that it plans to acquire LinkedIn in a massive $26.2 billion all-cash deal, the biggest acquisition deal in Microsoft's history, and first major acquisition under CEO Satya Nadella. Microsoft plans to pay $196 per LinkedIn share, which is 50% more than Friday's closing price for LinkedIn stock. The deal has already been unanimously approved by the board of directors for each company, and Microsoft hopes to close this deal later this year. Man, when I first read this, I was like, this is a no-brainer. This makes all the sense in the whole world. And I don't know why I never thought of this as a possibility before. What do you think about this, Kiki?
Oh, I agree with you. I mean, the data that LinkedIn has for businesses is just huge. And then Microsoft, with all of its enterprise work, I mean, it's just like put the 2 and 2 together. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, Microsoft is going to have all of this enterprise data that nobody else has access to. And Microsoft is going to be like, dominate.
It is so interesting because you think about like Ballmer's purchase of Nokia, which we know is like a huge write down, a big mistake. I mean, it just proves again that Satya Nadella is so smart and knows what he's doing. Like the future is data, and this is really great data. I mean, we all joined LinkedIn. Like, I mean, LinkedIn is so interesting because it's one of the first social networks, and I think most people just joined because they felt like they had to because like their boss, invited them, or they were really good about inviting people. It wasn't a time where we were like, you know what, I don't think I want to provide my personal information, and it still isn't. When you're looking for a job, that's where you put your information. You feel like you have to.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like an online resume site for just about everybody. And so I think you're right. Everybody's gone on there. I don't know how useful it is to everybody who is now part of the social network, like any social network, but it's still very valuable to lots of people. So especially Microsoft.
And people feel like you said, they feel the need to keep it updated, which is probably the most important aspect of what Microsoft is getting, which is basically they're getting an org chart for all the companies out there. And that's pretty much what they have. And I mean, they get that massive amount of customers, 433 million users. Many of those are paying for premium services. They get the they basically get access to how all of those people relate to each other, information behind the scenes that not all companies have access to. It's a pretty and the tools that LinkedIn probably has to analyze all of that data. And so you kind of take that, you couple it with Microsoft's kind of cloud aspect. I think what Microsoft realized with Nokia, and maybe they keep realizing this, I'm not quite sure, is that again, hardware is hard. And it's not as easy as buying a company like Nokia and being able to embrace hardware in that way. That didn't work for them. Their strength is software and services, and this ties in perfectly with that.
Yeah, I mean, and they have all the information we've talked about, plus where it's information that people need, like eating. You need a job. I mean, and this is information so you know where people come from, where they go to next. And especially now, because everyone has this general anxiety that the robots are coming to take our jobs, and work is changing, and it will change. Like what we see as work now is not going to be what we see it in a decade. And I think Microsoft knows that. Like, and this is information that people want to have. They want to know how they can continue to work when a robot could do their job.
Mm-hmm. Robots. Always back to robots. How about some gaming robots? Let's shift gears a little bit and go to E3, the gaming conference that started today. Microsoft, again, there unveiled the rumored and somewhat expected upgraded Xbox One S. Basically, it shrinks the size of the console by 40%. It paints it a nice stark white. That's not what this is the old one that we're looking at right here. It gets rid of the traditional and hated chunky power supply that's plagued the Xbox consoles before it. But underneath, it brings support for 4K Ultra HD, including 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, and also high dynamic range support for games and video playback. So, and we've talked about it at least a few times on this show leading up. The rumors were kind of leaking that there would be some sort of an upgraded but shrunk down 4K capable Xbox One. And here you go. There you go. The price on this, what is the price on this? Is going to be $399 for a 2 terabyte drive in there early August. And then there'll be a few other models that are released after that.
This is the last thing I'll say about robots, but Microsoft does call that color robot white.
Oh no. What are they saying? It looks nice. I'm sure Sam Miskovich will have something to say about this. But before we kind of move away from the gaming stuff, Microsoft also announced Project Scorpio, And this is a move away from traditional generational gaming, which I think Sam mentioned a little bit. Maybe it was Sam or a different guest sometime last week. This new Xbox device will have a 6 teraflop GPU, an 8-core CPU, and 320 gigs per second of memory bandwidth, fully capable of gaming in 4K, 60 frames per second, and support for virtual reality. And we're not going to even see this until they say holiday season 2017. Basically what they mean by moving beyond the generational kind of gap of these consoles is that all games, all peripherals are going to be compatible with, compatible with the current Xbox One up to this and backwards. So you buy a peripheral, it's going to work on the new machine, and moving forward. So any gaming thoughts? I don't know. But Kiki, are you a big gamer other than Minecraft for
Minecraft for my kid? I'm not a huge gamer myself, but we do like the games in the house, and my son is already asking me for virtual reality Minecraft. He's like, Mom, I know it's out there. I want it.
Yeah, it's just $4,000 for the developer kit. That's all. Come on, Mom. $4,000. You got $4,000 burning a hole in your pocket.
I love how he thinks of my bank account. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you just write a check. It's as easy as write a check, or just give him a credit card. Whatever. That's how it works, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I am really excited about where things are going to go with virtual reality. I mean, Megan, you mentioned, we're trying to get away from devices being right in front of our face. I think for a while we might get into being in, when we play games or maybe even artistic pursuits, watching movies, it might be in these virtual reality worlds. And I don't know, it's a different state, and it'll be fun to see where the technology goes. Into lots of living rooms, I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And finally, definitely shifting gears here, but in light of the terror attack in Orlando last night, Facebook actually activated its safety check feature to allow friends and relatives on Facebook to check in on residents or people who happen to be traveling in the area to make sure they're okay. Facebook actually launched this feature for emergency situations formally in 2014. Though it first appeared on the site after the earthquake and the resulting tsunami in Japan back in 2011. Last night's activation is kind of a big deal because it marks the first time this feature was used for an emergency situation in the United States. And I mean, Zuckerberg has already said, basically said that this feature is going to be rolled out a lot broader, just to kind of quell kind of criticisms that have risen over what qualifies, what doesn't. But overall, when you're talking about the massive scope and spread of just total number of users using Facebook, this is an incredible feature. And I know that it's valuable in a situation like this. So I'm happy to see that, and very sad for yesterday.
And let's hope they don't have to activate it again.
I know.
Anytime soon.
I know. Completely. So on Friday, Father Robert Balacer was on with me in Megan's absence. Fortunately, you did not get to talk about two-factor authentication with us on Friday. We discussed the benefits and the pitfalls of two-factor authentication. We asked you to weigh in on the topic, and we got some interesting responses. So we'll read some of these to you here. First of all, Jason from Royce City, Texas says, one thing I've done to ease the inconvenience of two-factor security, at least on my Google accounts, is by way of the Google Authenticator app on my Moto 360. Instead of the need to minimize the current app on my phone in order to open Authenticator, I simply launch the Authenticator app on my watch and type the number into the phone app. And that's a really great way of using, I think, a wearable, kind of what we were talking about earlier. If you happen to have this wearable on you, you might as well have some great uses for it other than just telling time, because it does so much more. And two-factor authentication is a great application of that, because two-factor can be really inconvenient. But having a dedicated device to kind of give you that code, that could make it a little bit easier anyways.
I absolutely agree. On my watch, it's really helpful because if you have the phone in the other room and you're doing something on the laptop, or maybe you're using the phone and it's easier to just look at the code on your watch. So, Bill from Huntsville, Alabama says, I use two-factor authentication on my desktop, but I have my sites set up to only ask the first time from a browser location they haven't encountered before. My desktop is not in an office environment, but at home, and my desktop locks after several minutes of inactivity.
Yeah, so just kind of saying, like, not all locations need this two-factor approach. Kiki, are you a user of two-factor authentication? I keep meaning to do it, but for some reason I'm just not pulling the trigger, and I'm trying to figure it out on the show.
Yeah, I haven't jumped either. So it's something that I know I need to do. There are a couple of things I need to do, and one of them is get myself into something like 1Password and then jump on the two-factor bandwagon. Because honestly, I would rather have a little bit of, annoyance at having to go through the 2 steps than have myself hacked and have my bank accounts frozen and whatever might happen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yes, I use LastPass. Definitely talked about it on the show in the past, and I would definitely agree. Like, you just sign up and let it kind of work in the background. It's actually pretty easy if you just kind of just install it and let it do its thing, and then as you log into sites, it just kind of works over time. So I highly recommend that as a first step. We also got an email from Doug, who wrote in to say, Father Robert Ballester suggested that one may not want to implement two-factor authentication for very frequently accessed accounts like Facebook, Google, etc. I do, and I avoid the frustration of always needing to enter a two-factor authentication code by specifying the two-factor authentication is not required on my trusted devices. Most sites actually offer this option. I still value the protection TFA provides on these sites if someone attempts access from a non-trusted device. So it's kind of like, again, kind of partial coverage, I suppose, in the places, because that's better than nothing, I suppose. He also points out the most complicated aspect of two-factor is how you can provide someone access to your accounts in the case of estate planning, let's say, or in case, of someone taking over your accounts for you. Those people who would take control of your accounts would need the phone, as well as direct access to the SMS on the phone and access to Authy, for example, for two-factor authentication, or whatever app is facilitating that. And that's an aspect I hadn't even thought of. Like, you lock it down, how is someone going to take over your account? There's just no way. I guess you just have to figure it out in advance.
Right. Well, or Facebook has, ways to do that where you can, designate someone as your account holder in the event of your death.
I wonder if that overrides something like two-factor authentication, though, and how it does that, how gracefully it does that.
Well, I think that you can if I'm like your designated person, then I can log in without, I just log into your account after you die, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how it works. Now that I
know. Like if it's that easy, though, then that kind of defeats the two-factor authentication aspect of locking it down to only one approach. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I guess that's my question.
Let's just not die.
Okay. Let's
Never.
Never, ever.
Let's work on that.
All right.
You're the scientist. Come on.
That's right.
Speaking of science, Dr. Kiki is going to share a few sciencey picks with us after this break. Let's take a quick moment and thank the sponsor of this episode. That's ZipRecruiter. If you're hiring, you need to know where to post your job to find the absolute best candidates out there, and that is not an easy task. If you want to find the perfect hire, you need to post your job on all of the top job sites. And with ZipRecruiter, now you can. Posting jobs in one place isn't enough to find quality candidates. And you don't want to leave this up to chance, because then you end up with people that maybe aren't the best to help you run your business. With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to more than 100 job boards, including social media networks like Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, all with a single click. You just post one time, and then you'll watch the candidate options roll into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface. ZipRecruiter actually offers optimized pages that look great on any screen. You can add their mobile apply process for more visitors and more applicants. You can find candidates in any city or industry nationwide. There's no more juggling emails or calls to your office. You can actually add multiple users to your account to manage all of that. And you can quickly screen candidates with real-world questions using free-form, multiple choice, or yes/no formats. You can also review all of those responses that you get in conjunction with our formatted resumes. You can rate them, hire the right person fast. It's all in an effort to just make this whole job of hiring the right person easier. In fact, by the way, Twit just hired our new editor using, you got it, ZipRecruiter. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by over 800,000 businesses. More than 100 million candidate applications have been delivered to this point. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT to check it out for yourself. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of Tech News Today.
Crowdsourcing has been integral to research, and no other place is better for finding test subjects than Amazon's Mechanical Turk. A new article in Science says that psychologists are becoming more and more dependent on Mechanical Turk subjects. Just last month, research subjects from Mechanical Turk completed 230,000 tasks on our computers in 3.3 million minutes. That's over 6 years worth of data. How important is Mechanical Turk to social science, Kiki?
Well, it's becoming more and more important. One of the big problems in social science is actually finding subjects. And I actually worked in a lab at one point where we had to put out an ad in a physical newspaper that hopefully somebody picked up at a cafe to read and then decided, hey, I'm going to call this number and find out if I can be a test subject, right? So it's not easy to get all the people you need for your study. And the Mechanical Turk that Amazon has put together has actually allowed researchers to harness a huge pool of people. And since the Mechanical Turk stuff got going and started becoming used by researchers, we now have more than 1,000 researchers that have registered experiments using it on Turk Prime. And so there's Turk Prime, and then there is another part of the platform in which researchers actually are writing their own apps. And so it's Turk is what they're using there. And so there's a researcher named, Todd Gorekis. He's a psychologist at New York University. And he basically says academic research would be really screwed if Amazon decided to shut it down. So there's a big question now from researchers going, hey, this is an amazing bucket of people that we can access, but it's a commercial property, and it's really up to Amazon whether or not they keep it going. And if they cancel it, if they decide it's not worth the money at some point, then what? What are the researchers going to do at that point? But it's a pretty interesting that Amazon has estimated that Turk has more than 500,000 workers, Turkers, from around the globe.
Not twerkers.
Not twerkers, but
okay,
maybe.
All right.
Maybe. I'm sure if you needed a twerker, you could find one on Amazon Turk.
And so researchers have been trying to figure out whether or not that number is accurate, because there is a problem with, you don't want somebody coming into your study and then coming into your next study and being a subject and being used over and over and over again. Because when people become professional subjects for studies, it does introduce a certain amount of bias into your data set. So it's better to try and figure out what the actual sample size is to figure out how many people they're really pulling from. So researchers know that Amazon marks the Turkers with an ID that's buried in the code after a work session is completed. And so they've been able to use those IDs, and they're using a wildlife ecology method that's called capture-recapture that's usually used to estimate the number of animals that there are, let's say fish in a lake or birds in a forest. You go out and you capture individuals, you mark them, and then you put them back in the wild. And it's really interesting. Smaller and slower changing populations usually end up with a higher proportion of recaptured animals. And so they basically did this using the IDs that Amazon gave the Turkers, and they've discovered that not 500,000, but more likely around 30,000 subjects over about a 3-year period. They've discovered that the number of Turkers that are probably willing to take part in an experiment at any one time is about 7,300. So it's much smaller than the 500,000 workers that Amazon initially estimated. The interesting thing here is, though, that the population does turn over after about 7 months. So there are people leaving the population and fresh workers, Turkers, coming in about every 7 months.
Well, it's interesting because there must have been a fair amount of bias in the way they used to do this. I mean, if you went to college, and you needed to have some extra money, you would go in and do studies and get paid for it. Then your bias was you were a college student.
And this basically what they're finding is that this population is kind of like that. In college, you have people coming into the population and going out, but it's a very small overall population. And that's what Gorekis says. He says what seemed like a virtually infinite subject pool was in fact more like a very large state university psychology pool. So it's not as good as they had hoped, but it still is a an extra population of people that they don't have to put as much work into finding. And so as a researcher, that's kind of the one big benefit.
And do they have to pay them as much? I mean, is that different, the amount of pay they get?
Yeah, so that's a question right now. They're having issues estimating what people are actually getting paid because Amazon takes a cut of between 20 to 40%. And then Turkers very often aren't just doing one study. They're signing up for lots of experiments and actually undertaking a lot of tasks at the same time. So the researchers maybe are doling out somewhere around $4 to $8 per hour. But when you're on a college campus, maybe what you're getting paid is $8 to $10 an hour. So the online work is not as equally paid as physical in the lab work. And that's something that does need to be fixed.
And what about privacy? I mean, is your Mechanical Turk login linked to your Amazon account?
Yes. So it is possible. Researchers in 2013 showed that you can actually link the two numbers, so the Amazon account and the Turk number, which is not necessarily good for privacy either.
Absolutely not. Moving kind of in a different direction, when it comes to public understanding of autism, it's, commonly considered to be primarily a disorder of the brain. But I actually didn't know this aspect. Most people on the spectrum also have some form of altered or heightened tactile sense. And it sounds like this aspect of autism is getting a renewed focus in research. What's this all about?
Yeah, so this study was actually very interesting. Researchers looked at the peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that go out into your periphery, your limbs, your arms, your legs, and not the brain. And people very often, we think of the brain as just like the brain. It's in your head. It makes things work. But your brain is connected to all the other parts of your body, and your brain communicates with the world through your limbs, through your periphery. And like you said, in autism, very often there's a problem there. And so individuals will maybe react strongly to very, very slight touches, things that are not or should not cause alarm do. They ended up taking mice. So this isn't a study in people, but it does prove the concept. They mutated genes for peripheral nerves to show that it was actually a disorder of the nerves that could be in part responsible for some autistic behaviors. So young mice who had these mutations put into their genes, their nerves didn't fire correctly, and they weren't sending information to the brain correctly. And so they found these young mice not understanding that something was smooth when it was smooth, or thinking that it was smooth when in fact it was rough. And so not getting the proper tactile context, and also having a startle response to just very simple puffs of air. One of the most interesting aspects of this is that they looked at not just developing mice, but adult mice. And they showed that when the mutations were added in to the nerves when the mice were adults, the adults didn't have any of the same behavioral issues. So there's definitely some kind of a learning window that's in there, so that during development, individuals learn to have these like fear responses and inappropriate responses to touch because their nerves aren't firing and sending that information to the brain correctly. So the question now is, since we know this is happening during development, are there drugs that we can develop? Is there potential kind of genetic modification that we might be able to undertake for people? I mean, is there something that we can do to help therapeutically help kids so that their arms and their legs and the skin, the periphery, talks to the brain in a way that allows the brain to act accordingly and not take things out of context?
Yeah, it's it makes perfect sense, right? If something is uncomfortable, you will do what you need to do in order to avoid that uncomfortable situation, right? You might avoid putting yourself into that position, and then in doing so, you kind of shut yourself off from exploring the world, basically, because of it. That's
exactly
fascinating.
So people, if it's as if you're reaching out to try and touch the world, and then everything is it's not right. It doesn't feel good. It isn't okay. And so you shut yourself off. You don't try anymore because it makes you feel not okay. Yeah. So it explains a lot. And I think it really goes a long way toward new developments. And I think a real holistic approach to treating autism, and not just treating it like an issue in the brain, but more so it's an entire body issue.
Right. Fascinating.
Well, yeah, this is really interesting. Thank you so much. It's like we spend so much time on this show being like, research says, science says, but it's so great to talk to someone who's in there talking about these stories and thinking about these issues all the time. So highly recommend your podcast. And we're not done with you yet, so hold on to your Star Trek communicators. We've got some big news in VR, but first let's take a minute to thank Wealthfront, the sponsor of this episode. You invest for the long term for you or your family's financial health, but trying to do it yourself, especially the right way, is complex and time-consuming. Luckily, there's Wealthfront. Traditional advisors charge huge fees between 1% and 3% of what they manage. With Wealthfront, you pay 0.25% a year. That's 25 basis points, 0 commissions, and no hidden fees. That's less than $5 a month to invest a $30,000 account. There are no additional charges for any of Wealthfront's services. You can get started investing today with as little as $500. Unlike other financial advisors, Wealthfront won't bog you down with dozens of questions. They have simplified their risk identification process, which allows you to begin investing sooner. It only takes a few minutes to sign up at wealthfront.com, and it goes right to work, monitoring your portfolios around the clock and taking action as soon as an opportunity arises. Wealthfront portfolios are based on modern portfolio theory and are designed to adjust according to your personal risk tolerance while staying diversified and tax efficient. Wealthfront is transparent and accessible. You can view and track all your accounts in one place. And now Wealthfront can track both your Wealthfront and your non-Wealthfront bank and brokerage accounts that they will provide in a summary of all of your assets. You can see every trade that Wealthfront makes on your behalf in your dashboard, on your desktop, or with their mobile app. Wealthfront manages almost $3 billion in client assets, and it's growing rapidly every day. What are you waiting for? Invest in your future today with Wealthfront. Visit wealthfront.com/TNT to sign up and get your free personalized investment portfolio. You'll see the customized allocation they recommend for your profile. And just for Twit listeners, if you sign up to invest, Wealthfront will manage your first $15,000 entirely free of charge for life. Join the many Twit fans who have seen huge success with Wealthfront and claim your offer today at wealthfront.com/TNT.
All right, so you ever want to be part of the crew on the Starship Enterprise? Yes? Kiki, you?
Absolutely. Except not with a red shirt.
Okay, probably.
I have a blue shirt. Look at that.
That's an important distinction. I'm wondering if that's maybe an unlockable character. Soon, if you happen to have a Vive, an Oculus Rift, or eventually a PlayStation VR, you can do just that thanks to Ubisoft's upcoming game, Star Trek Bridge Crew, which the company announced officially at E3 today. The promotional video shows LeVar Burton, Jerry Ryan, and Carl Urban from past Star Trek franchises strapped into VR goggles, playing the game for the first time. It's a little cheesy, ain't gonna lie. Everyone must work as a team in control of their own specific roles and their tasks, which basically means pushing buttons at the right time while communicating with other team members to keep everything synchronized and ultimately keeping the ship alive. It's 1 to 4 players and has, like I said, the different roles. Captain gives the orders with information only he or she has in the context of the gameplay. Engineering controls power levels. Tactician commands the weapons and the shields. And Helm navigates the ship. I don't know. I think this sounds kind of fun. I'm not sure. I don't know if this is going to satisfy true Star Trek fans, but I think it looks like a lot of fun. They don't show it.
Might be fun. It's like a Guitar Hero for Star Trek.
I have to imagine. See, I will say this video kind of points out the challenge that VR has, which is
you look weird doing it.
How do you convey to people that this is an experience that they have to do, right? It's video from the VR experience. It just looks like video from a video game. So instead you have people obviously in the world with VR strapped to their head, and then they're talking about how cool it is. Is this the format that we're going to see for video game, VR game advertisements going forward? Is people telling you how cool it is? If you could just see it for yourself.
If you could only see it for yourself.
Yes.
I love that.
It's the biggest, like, you got to be there. There ever, you had
know.
to be there.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's one of the very isolating facts of VR. You
Yeah.
know, just you
a
don't understand
huge
if you have
challenge.
it. It's very expensive, so you will have to work in a place that has it or have a lot of money, and you don't get it unless you use it.
Yeah. Have either of you played a game called Space Team or heard of Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes?
Space Team I've played with the kids. Like, you all have your own device.
Yeah.
It was like in an effort to, like, okay, we're all on our devices. Let's all hook them together and play together. It's fun.
How did that work? I mean,
It was fun for a
in
while.
that effort, and
Yeah.
then it got boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they always do that. This kind of reminds me of that, but in the Star Trek world. I don't know. I was a fan of The Next Generation. I ain't gonna lie, I wasn't a huge fan of the original because when I was a kid, it was kind of boring to me. I think you're going to tear up my geek card.
What?
Someone's
I
going to
know.
tear up my geek card for saying that. Yeah, sorry. I just admitted something I didn't mean to admit. Dang it.
It's okay. I mean, there are Star Trek people and Star Wars people.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're separate. I know you're a Star Wars person.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
It's okay.
That's where I sit. Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
They don't have to be separate.
They don't have to be. No.
They don't have to be. You can also be a cat and a dog person.
No, I can't be a cat person. I'm allergic to cats.
Oh, right.
See?
Okay.
I must be on one side or another. It's just the way it goes, Kiki.
All
This is
right,
me here.
fine.
Well, Dr. Kiki, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to talk to you and hear your science stories, and thank you for talking to us about all the other stories. The best place for people to follow you online, what should they do?
Well, I am Dr. Kiki on Twitter, so at @DrKiki. And my website is twist.org for This Week in Science.
Fantastic. Check out the podcast, everyone, This Week in Science, and you will not be disappointed. It's full of all of the awesomeness that you've heard today. Kiki, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much. I really had a good time.
Awesome. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Tomorrow's guest?
Oh, yeah, I guess that's me. Tomorrow's guest is going to be Becky Worley. Sorry. Apologies. We're going to have Becky Worley on the show again tomorrow, and we are always looking forward to having Becky on the show. TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 12 a.m. UTC at twit.tv/live. You can take part in the show by emailing us, tnt@twit.tv. You can leave us a short voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. And you can find the show on Twitter. We're at Tech News Today TV.
We are also on Google Play Music, iTunes, Chromecast, Apple TV, so much more. I'm sure you know how to subscribe to a podcast, so go do it and tell a friend to do it. And you can tweet at me. I am at Megan Morrone.
And I'm at Jason Howell. Thanks to our technical director, Josh Winich. First day on the controls. Good job, sir. And pretty much everybody in this place that helps us produce this show. We couldn't do it without you guys. And thanks to you for talking tech with us today. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, everyone. Do this over Kiki's head. Whoa.